The Detroit Lions are in the middle of one of the most important off-seasons of the Dan Campbell era, and everything right now starts with one central question that directly affects the future of this team. Who will be calling the plays on offense in 2026? This is not a casual search, and it's not a situation the Lions are approaching lightly. Around the league, offensive coordinator openings are piling up, and Detroit finds itself competing in a crowded market where nearly 40% of the NFL is either looking for a new offensive coordinator or will soon be forced to fill that role once head coaches are hired elsewhere. That context matters because it explains why the Lions are casting such a wide net and why patience is required, even if the fan base is understandably anxious. What stands out immediately is that the Lions are not limiting themselves to familiar or safe names. They are talking to everyone, and that includes candidates with very different backgrounds, philosophies, and levels of experience. David Blau, for example, was interviewed but is staying with the Washington Commanders, which tells you that not every conversation will turn into a hire, and that Detroit is doing its due diligence rather than chasing quick answers. At the same time, Mike McDaniel is scheduled to speak with the Lions, and that name alone changes the temperature of the conversation. McDaniel is not just an offensive coordinator candidate, he is also drawing interest from multiple teams for head coaching positions. That alone tells you how highly regarded he is around the league and why his situation is complicated. If the Lions were to land someone like McDaniel, the most important question would be whether he would have full control of play calling, because that is clearly a priority in this search. Another name now firmly on the radar is Mike Kafka, the 38-year-old interim head coach and offensive coordinator of the New York Giants. Kafka is a fascinating candidate, and his resume sparks debate for good reason. On one hand, his teams have not finished higher than 21st in passing offense, which is a statistic that jumps off the page and raises legitimate concerns. On the other hand, when you look deeper, you see creativity, aggression, and an ability to adapt. Lions fans who remember the Week 12 matchup at Ford Field saw Kafka empty the playbook, dialing up trick plays like a double reverse pass for a touchdown and a flea flicker that moved the ball effectively. His offenses have consistently been able to run the football, and that matters in Detroit, where physicality and balance are core parts of the team's identity. Kafka also brings the perspective of a former NFL quarterback, having played for years in the league after starring at Northwestern, and that experience shows up in how he designs and sequences plays. The Lions' approach here reflects a broader philosophy: talk to everybody. Whether it's established names, rising assistants, or even recently available coaches like Arthur Smith, the organization wants to explore every possible fit. This is not about falling in love with one name early. It's about understanding the landscape, especially when so many teams are hiring head coaches who will then bring their own offensive coordinators with them. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and others now need new coordinators, which tightens the market even further. At the same time, Detroit remains an attractive job. There is stability, a strong head coach in Dan Campbell, and a roster that has proven it can win games. That combination still makes the Lions' opening one of the better opportunities available. While the offensive coordinator search dominates the headlines, there is also movement and recognition on the defensive side. Kelvin Shepard, who not long ago was facing criticism from parts of the fan base, is now set to interview for the Miami Dolphins head coaching vacancy. That speaks volumes about how he is viewed inside league circles. Shepard is known as a strong communicator, a demanding leader, and someone who commands respect. Even if he does not land that job, the fact that he is getting this opportunity reinforces the idea that the Lions coaching staff is drawing attention around the NFL, which again feeds back into why this offseason is so delicate. Then there is the message from the very top. Lions owner Sheila Ford Hamp sent a letter to season ticket holders that was direct, honest, and revealing. She acknowledged that the 9-8 season was not good enough and that the results did not match expectations. At the same time, she made it clear that the organization does not believe drastic change is the answer. Instead, she emphasized refocusing, evolving, and moving forward. That word, evolving, is important. It suggests that while the core remains intact, the Lions understand that standing still is not an option.
The roster has produced 36 wins over the last 3 seasons, but past success does not guarantee future results. There's an understanding that new ideas, new voices, and perhaps bolder decisions are necessary to take the next step toward a championship. All of this paints a picture of a franchise at a crossroads, not in crisis, but in transition. The Lions are stable, competitive, and respected, yet they know that the margin between staying good and becoming truly great is thin. The offensive coordinator hire will shape how this team looks, feels, and performs in 2026, and the decisions being made right now will echo long after this offseason ends. With so many candidates, so many moving parts, and so much at stake, the question becomes not just who the Lions will choose, but what direction that choice signals for the future of this offense and this team as a whole. What do you think this offensive coordinator search says about where the Detroit Lions are headed next? What makes this moment even more delicate is the timing across the league and how every move elsewhere can quietly impact Detroit's options. With 9 head coaching vacancies now open, including Pittsburgh after Mike Tomlin stepped away following 19 seasons, the ripple effect is impossible to ignore. Every time a head coach is hired, another offensive coordinator job opens, and every time that happens, another candidate disappears from the pool. That is why the Lions' strategy of talking to as many people as possible is not hesitation, it's survival in a hyper-competitive hiring cycle. Detroit cannot afford to sit back and wait for the market to settle, because the market is not going to settle anytime soon. The Tomlin situation alone reshapes the landscape. Pittsburgh is one of the most stable franchises in NFL history, and an opening like that immediately attracts top-tier coaching talent. When jobs like that come open, assistants who might have been realistic coordinator targets suddenly find themselves pulled into head coaching conversations. That is exactly why someone like Mike McDaniel becomes such a complicated case. Teams are not just looking at him as a play designer or offensive mind, they're evaluating him as the face of an entire franchise. For Detroit, that creates a question that goes beyond scheme or creativity. If the Lions hire their next offensive coordinator, that person must be fully committed to Detroit, not treating the role as a short-term stepping stone that could be gone in one season. That concern applies to multiple candidates in this cycle. Around the league, there is a noticeable thinning of the traditional offensive coaching trees. Many of the elite offensive minds are already head coaches, and the usual pipeline of obvious play-calling assistants is not as deep as it once was. That forces teams like the Lions to dig deeper, to evaluate coaches who may not have called plays yet or who have done so under less than ideal circumstances. This is where context becomes critical. A coordinator's raw rankings don't always tell the full story, especially when roster limitations, quarterback instability, or organizational dysfunction play a role. Detroit's front office understands that, which is why creativity, adaptability, and leadership are being weighed just as heavily as statistical production. Continuity also remains a major theme in this discussion. The Lions have built their recent success on culture, consistency, and trust between coaches and players. Disrupting that too aggressively could do more harm than good. At the same time, standing pat is not an option. Sheila Fordhamp's message made it clear that while drastic change is not the plan, evolution is necessary. That evolution could show up in subtle ways, like modernizing certain aspects of the offense, becoming more aggressive situationally, or empowering the next coordinator with true autonomy. It could also show up in personnel decisions that reflect a willingness to move on from familiar faces in favor of new energy and different skill sets. Another layer to all of this is how attractive the Lions' job actually is from a league-wide perspective. This is not a rebuilding situation. The Lions have a proven head coach in Dan Campbell, a general manager in Brad Holmes who has earned respect for his drafting and roster construction, and a core of players who have won consistently over the last 3 seasons. That stability matters to coaching candidates. It means they are stepping into an environment where expectations are high but realistic, and where the foundation is already in place. That should, in theory, allow Detroit to be selective, even in a crowded market. At the same time, the Lions must balance ambition with fit. Not every big name or trendy hire is the right answer. The next offensive coordinator has to align with Campbell's leadership style, complement the existing roster, and handle the pressure that comes with coaching a team that is no longer a surprise but a target. Every opponent circles Detroit now. Every mistake is magnified. The Lions don't need someone chasing headlines. They need someone who can sustain success week after week. As this process continues, it's important to remember that silence does not equal inactivity. Interviews, evaluations, and internal discussions are happening constantly behind the scenes. The Lions are weighing not just what these candidates have done, but who they are, how they communicate, and whether they can grow with the team rather than outgrowing it too quickly. This is about the long game, not just surviving the next season. All signs point to an offseason that will define the next chapter of Lions football. The offensive coordinator decision will shape how this team attacks defenses, develops players, and responds when adversity hits. It will also send a message to the locker room and the fan base about the organization's vision moving forward. If the first part of this story was about understanding the chaos of the market and the names involved, This continuation is about recognizing the stakes and the philosophy guiding Detroit's choices. Now it's your turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let me know which direction you believe the Lions should go with this offensive coordinator hire, what traits matter most to you, and how aggressive you think this team should be as it tries to take the next step. From here, the conversation naturally shifts to what this decision will mean once the season actually begins, because hiring an offensive coordinator is not just an off-season headline, it becomes a weekly storyline the moment the first game kicks off. Every third down call, every red zone possession, every late game situation will be filtered through the lens of this hire. That reality is exactly why the Lions are being methodical. They know that whoever steps into this role will immediately be judged not only by wins and losses, but by feel, rhythm, and identity. Fans will want to know what kind of offense this is going to be when things aren't going smoothly, because that's where coordinators truly earn their reputation. One of the most important under-the-radar elements in this search is communication. The Lions' offense has thrived when players clearly understand their roles and believe in the plan being put in place. Dan Campbell's leadership style demands honesty, clarity, and accountability, and the next offensive coordinator must fit seamlessly into that structure. This is not a place for ego or rigid systems that refuse to adapt. Detroit's offense needs someone who can evolve week to week, opponent to opponent, without losing the core principles that have made the team successful. That balance is difficult to strike, and it's why interviews go far beyond whiteboard sessions and scheme talk. There is also a developmental component that cannot be ignored. An offensive coordinator in Detroit will be responsible not just for calling plays, but for shaping the growth of the entire offensive unit. That includes maximizing what the roster already does well and finding ways to elevate players who may not yet be stars. The Lions have shown that they value growth and internal development, and that philosophy has to extend to the offensive side of the ball. The next coordinator must be someone who can teach, adjust, and problem solve in real time, not just script the first 15 plays and hope for the best. As the league continues to reshuffle, the Lions' patience will likely be tested by fans who want resolution. That impatience is understandable, especially after a season that ended short of expectations. But there's a difference between urgency and panic, and everything we've seen suggests Detroit is operating with urgency, not desperation. They understand the opportunity in front of them. The window is open, the roster is competitive, and the standard has been raised. This hire is about sustaining that window, not rushing through it and risking long-term stability. Another factor that will eventually come into focus is how this offensive coordinator complements the defense. Football is interconnected, and the Lions know that offensive philosophy affects defensive performance. Time of possession, situational efficiency, and game management all play a role in keeping the team balanced. A coordinator who understands that bigger picture, who knows when to be aggressive and when to protect the team, will be invaluable. That kind of situational awareness often separates good coordinators from great ones. What makes this moment so compelling is that it represents growth for the organization itself. Not long ago, Detroit was simply hoping to be relevant. Now, the Lions are navigating the same high-level decisions that perennial contenders face every offseason. They are competing for top coaching talent, dealing with league-wide demand, and making choices that assume postseason expectations rather than rebuilding patience. That shift in mindset is significant, and it reflects how far the franchise has come in a relatively short period of time. As this story continues to unfold, the key takeaway is that the Lions are not searching for a miracle worker. They are searching for alignment. Alignment with the head coach, the front office, the locker room, and the long-term vision of the franchise. When they find that, the name will matter less than the results and the consistency that follow. At this stage, it's also important to zoom out and understand how much trust the organization is placing in this process, because that trust reflects confidence in what has already been built. The Lions are no longer operating from a place of insecurity. They are not scrambling to fix a broken system or hoping a single hire will magically change everything. Instead, they are refining, adjusting, and looking for the right voice to guide an offense that already has an identity. That distinction matters. It changes how candidates view the job and how the front office evaluates them. This is about precision, not reconstruction. What often gets lost in these discussions is how the next offensive coordinator will be asked to handle expectations internally. Players in that locker room now expect to win. They expect accountability. They expect clarity. A coordinator who comes in with vague answers, inconsistent messaging, or an inability to explain the why behind decisions will lose credibility quickly. Detroit's culture has been built on transparency and shared purpose, and the offense has to reflect that same mindset. The Lions aren't just asking, "Can you design plays?" They're asking, "Can you lead a room?" There's also the reality that whoever takes this job will immediately be under